more about Azure, or actually anything Microsoft, just go to docs.com. That's going to take you to a landing page where we can get documentation on everything inside of the Microsoft ecosystem, specifically Azure as well. So there you can drill in and learn about all the different services that we have, the resources that we have, how to spin them up. We'll give you architectural diagrams. We'll give you quick starts. Within 5 minutes, you can have new resources actually spun up in Azure that you can start to use. I find that Docs is amazing because it's also open source. So if you find something that's missing or an error, you can go to our GitHub repository, fork the repository, and send us a pull request, and you can see your changes live in Docs. We've also localized Docs. It's an enormous number of languages that you can use, so no matter what language you speak, you're going to be able to have a really great first-class experience in Docs. So no matter what it is that you want to learn about at Microsoft, just go to docs.com, and you're going to be met with all the value and information that you can possibly want.
Hey everybody, it's Jay Gordon, and thank you so much, Donovan. I really appreciate your little words of wisdom there. It's another Azure FunBytes. My name is Jay Gordon, and what do we do every week? We get together and we have conversation about the different tools, products, services, and also the vendors that help you have an incredible experience using Azure. So we're rolling along this summer. So much going on, lots to see, lots to do, and I don't want to waste too much time just with preamble because let's face it, time's a wasting. And so as we saw this week, we've got Matty Stratton. He is going to be part of the show today, and we're going to talk about Pulumi. And why just talk about it? Why don't I just bring him in?
Hey,
Matt.
What's up, Jay? Oh, what? Happy Thursday. It's Thursday, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely. So, Matt, you are someone that I've known for quite a while now. You know, we met years ago at, I think, a MongoDB event that I was working at. It was essentially, hey, there are two guys with tattoos. Let's get them together.
Pretty much, yeah. It was. You were watching us doing the video together. It was like, wait, which one is which? Because two bearded dudes with tattoos, wearing all black probably. Absolutely.
And so I've since lost that beard, but I still have the joy of spending time talking with you, Matt. And we're going to talk about something that I think is really important today. We're going to talk about infrastructure as code. We're going to talk about using programming languages you might already know and use yourself today. And more than anything, we'll discuss how we can use these things to build infrastructure on Azure. So we'll get into that in just a minute. But Matt, I want to remind people of some things that I always try to remind them of every time we broadcast in this. One, we have a poll. And so I'd love you to go ahead and take our poll. I'd like to know if you've used Pulumi. I think it's going to be a really great way to kind of get who has tried it, who is looking to try it, and who's. It's complicated is my favorite extra answer there because sometimes people have started playing with things and they really haven't built anything. But, it's good to know. So if you can head over there, I really appreciate it. And if you scroll down a little, you'll see that there are docs for today's show. You'll be able to get all sorts of great information about Pulumi from here. And I also want to remind you that there is the Introduction to Azure Fundamentals on Microsoft Learn that you can head over to. Microsoft Learn is full of tons of great information. As you can see, I am a level 10 wizard in Azure because it's all gamified. So you get points, you compete against your friends. I don't know, like Pokemon, you got to get them all. So give that a shot. And so we're going to get into the show now. We only have an hour, and that hour goes by so very fast, Matt. And I've really been looking forward to this. So I want to get started before we actually start talking about Pulumi, which I'm very, very interested in hearing more about. I'd love to hear a little bit about you. I know something about you, but I want to make sure my audience does. So why don't you tell us, how did you get here?
That's a really great question. And I think I, like a lot of other people, got where I am through a lot of unintentional consequences. So the first time I dropped out of college, I was a theater major. The second time I was a computer science major. But I did start my life thinking I was going to be an actor or a director. And then decided I needed to, for various reasons, had to make some money. And it's actually, my Microsoft connection is really funny to me because I didn't grow up with anything Microsoft. And in my brief stints in college, it was all, Unix. And I started working for an Apple service center, and I was fixing Macs who were in a lot of print shops, which used Windows NT machines as their back-end RIP station for the large format printers. So I had to learn NT. And because of that, I learned Microsoft. And then I spent like the next 15 years as a Microsoft system administrator. Who knew? And I went and I worked for Chef for a while, and I was kind of the Microsoft guy. They kept wanting me to write Chef cookbooks for SharePoint, and I kept saying no. But yeah, I spent some time working at Chef, which is an infrastructure as code organization and project. I spent some time at PagerDuty doing developer advocacy. I'm very involved in the DevOps community. I've been, started DevOps Days Chicago. I'm the global chair for DevOps Days around the world. And now, I've been at Pulumi for about 4 months. And throughout all this time, I've had such a great opportunity to meet people all over the world, both working at different vendors and also working at different companies, and the cool stuff they've built. But my background is ops, my friend. I'm
the same, absolutely the same. So you say ops, and you talked about Chef.
Yep.
And this is all kind of the basis of what we're going to be talking about today. And we're going to be chatting about Pulumi. And Pulumi is obviously an infrastructure as code tool that helps you codify exactly what it is you want to build and make sure that every single time what you expect runs does run and builds, and allows you then to do your deployments and all that type of happy stuff. One of the big questions I have, Matt, is why would someone choose Pulumi? What's the big selling point that you can give me?
So a couple places that stand out to me, and it took me a while to decide that this is what I wanted to be a part of. And in a lot of ways, I mean, the big appeal of Pulumi is that I write my infrastructure code as software. And we've talked for a long time about this idea of infrastructure as code. And so much I usually think about it as, well, what we've done is we've built infrastructure using code. But we don't actually treat it like software. And one of the things I always loved about Chef was, because my Chef code was written in Ruby, it meant I had access to the entire Ruby ecosystem. But that's great as long as Ruby is what you know. So the big appeal to Pulumi, number one, is because I'm writing my infra code in a first-class programming language. I have access to all of the logic, all of the operations. I can do conditionals. I can do all that. It's a programming language, but it's not a specific programming language. I can write it in TypeScript. I can write it in Go. I can write it in Python or anything in .NET. And so that's one of the big appeals to that. The other part that I think is really powerful is this idea we have around this automation API, which I'm not going to dig into as much today, but to me, that's the next level, which is that so much of when I worked at Chef, what people wanted was to say, like, it's not just enough to configure a server, it lives in a world, right? I have to get it registered with, my CMDB, or I have to, get it into a PagerDuty rotation or whatever. And so being able to build these infrastructure and platforms, but I can use Pulumi code to do that. It's also really, if you are a not OPSI type person who doesn't have a lot of cloud experience, but your programming language, you're like, I know I just need to get this thing into Azure, but I don't want to have to go in and figure out all the stuff in the console or learn this particular thing. I can use the great resources in Pulumi to just sort of code it along with my application.
Gotcha. So I'd love to hear a little bit about this, if you could explain it, the Pulumi Cloud Engineering Platform, because it looks like you've got a solution that works across all the clouds. Obviously, you could do the same with your on-prem and create hybrid environments, correct?
Yeah, I mean, as long as it's something we have a provider for. But
Sure.
yeah, it's not limited to the major clouds, or again, Kubernetes. It can be an EKS or AKS or something like that. It can be your own localized Kubernetes. if you're using whatever your quote private cloud is. But if we have a resource for it, so yeah, it's wherever it goes. So again, the word cloud does a lot of lifting these days,
Yeah, you sure are right.
Or as I like to call serverless, it is cloudless, or private serverless is cloudless. Oh my God, I got the joke totally wrong. Your on-premise data center is cloudless. That's the joke. Oh my God. Anyway, but yeah, so we talk, and it's Pulumi is a platform for cloud engineering, is the way that I like to think about it. And I have been doing a lot of thinking about how these ideas of cloud engineering is, in a way, it's like taking the word DevOps back. Because DevOps started to mean one thing, and it sort of turned into meaning Kubernetes and CD pipelines. And that's just part of DevOps. And DevOps, and so cloud engineering to me and other people, I didn't invent this idea, is taking things that we know, these great patterns of success from software development, and applying them to infrastructure, to compliance, to platform management, and all that stuff. And that just shouldn't sound like a new idea. It sure as heck sounds like what DevOps was being talked about 9 to 10 years ago. But before we decided that it was all about, writing automation and throwing it on container orchestration. So really, we think about this idea that cloud engineers are people you build resources, you build things using cloud resources, whatever that might mean. You have to deploy them. You have to get them somewhere where people can use them. And then they're managed according to your policy. And that doesn't necessarily mean uppercase C, scary compliance. It's just whatever the ways are that you keep things in your org.
Makes sense to me. And so, Matt, as we get started, because I definitely want you to show me, I know you've got some content ready to go. I want to remind everybody, head over to the Learn TV website and let us know, have you used Pulumi to build your cloud infrastructure? Vote now. We want to learn a little bit more about you and what you're doing and how you're doing it. And so it's super important that you go ahead and take that poll. And also, if you've got questions, you can use the native chat that you may be using in, say, Twitch, or Twitter, or YouTube, or go ahead and hit this section on the side and you can go ahead and ask your question. We'll go ahead and answer it. Really, really do appreciate our viewers. There's some of you right now that I know have some burning questions about Pulumi, and we're going to absolutely get to them. So, Matt, I know you've got a presentation ready to go and some demos to show me. We've got about a good 40 minutes, 45 minutes to go. Why don't I go ahead and bring up your screen and let you kind of jump into it? Sound good?
Absolutely. Okay, so you actually talked about a bunch of the stuff that was going to be in my deck. So that's awesome. So we're not going to have a lot of slideware, but I wanted to dig a little bit more into this your way thing, right? And what we mean by that with Pulumi is this is giving us, whether it's your cloud. So again, today we're going to be talking about doing this on Azure, but there's all sorts of different cloud resources that you can use Pulumi to configure. And whether that's at the data level, so like, again, if you've got Mongo instances and stuff you're working with, Rabbit, MySQL, but also connecting into PagerDuty. We also do, and that's, so wherever the resources are that you need, there's probably a Pulumi resource provider for that, which is pretty great. And then, but the thing is, it's in your language, right? So the languages that are currently first class supported here in Pulumi are, Node, so either JavaScript or TypeScript, and I'm going to be using TypeScript today. But I write a lot of Pulumi code in Go, and Python is incredibly popular, as we know, and a great way to leverage Pulumi, but also .NET. So whether you want to write in C# or F# or VB.NET, you've got that. But again, that gives us that whole ecosystem, so I can do wonderful things in Visual Studio. And one of the things I thought was really kind of cool when I started working with Pulumi, what's the first thing you do when you take on a new tool? You're like, is there a VS Code extension for this to make it easier for me to use it?
Absolutely.
There is not one for Pulumi, and you want to know why? Because you don't need it, because it's all coming from the programming language. So there's no snippets or type aheads or anything, because it all just comes from the NPM, because they're all part of those packages, and that's really powerful. But hey, if you want to rock out an Emacs and leverage that foot pedal, you can do that just as easily. And again, where Pulumi packages that you write are stored, they can be in NPM, they can be in PyPy, on GitHub, do Docker, all that good stuff. But also the flow, right? So whether you're using like GitHub Actions to be able to get these deployments to happen, Pulumi supports that super well. You know, if you're using Jenkins or Travis or Circle or something like that as well, it's all just part of it. And I think that's really the key idea. And what we're just trying to do here is get our arms around the modern cloud is complex. There's so many pieces and parts to it. And we want to focus on our differentiation. And also, I love this idea of bringing the cloud closer to application development, because infrastructure exists to serve the services that we give to our users. So when these are more in sync with each other and they're thought about more connectedly, we just, everybody gets better at this. And that helps with our, collaboration, which is super, super great. So what I'd like to do now, I'm going to switch my my screen share to my IDE.
Sure.
And I think we just need to dig in and do some stuff, So a couple things when we think about Pulumi, and I'll give you a little bit of backstory. I've already done a couple things on my machine here, just because watching me install stuff is not necessarily fun. Maybe it is. I don't know. Whatever's fun for you. But so the thing to remember about Pulumi is, Pulumi is free and open source. But what you have to have with Pulumi, when you run a Pulumi program, which is this is my stuff I want to have happen. Like Jay said, it's a program that's saying, here's the thing that I want. Does it already exist that way? If so, cool, don't do anything. If not, well, fix that. It's like a test repair loop. This is common configuration management principle, right? So in order to do that, Pulumi has to have a place to store the state. It has to know the state that your cloud resources and stuff are in so it can compare them. So enter the Pulumi platform. So there's multiple places you can store state. You can store it locally if you really want to YOLO yourself. You can put it in an S3 bucket. You can put it in blob storage. I can't remember what the GCP equivalent is, but whatever, right? Pretty much anywhere that you can store a file, that's fine. Or we have a SaaS platform that you can use. And for individuals, it's totally free. Like if you have multiple teams you want to collaborate with, you need enterprise features like RBAC and policies and stuff, then yeah, that's where you start to pay. But the beautiful thing about using the SaaS as your state store is then you don't have to do it, right? And, as Charity Majors likes to say, the best tool is the one that you don't have to have. The second best tool is a SaaS, right? Our job is to be good at managing state. Your job is to sell shoes or whatever. But if you don't want to do that, that's cool. You don't have to. So on one hand, but what that matters, the reason this comes up is Pulumi, the service, doesn't talk to the clouds at all, right? So when I'm running my Pulumi program, that's what's interfacing with Azure or AWS or GCP or whatever. So because of that, I need the Azure CLI, and I've already installed that. That was a long way of me going, yes, I have. So if we take a look, if I just do AZ, we can see, yep, sure do have. If I run Pulumi and I say, who am I? You can see Pulumi's installed, and I am Matt Stratton. And also I need to upgrade my Pulumi, but that's okay. We won't do a brew upgrade in the middle of a live stream because we know better.
So part of that AZCLI process that you have, you're going to need to authenticate, I'd imagine.
Yes.
And so I think that there's two ways you can tell me that if I'm right or wrong. You can create a service principal and add that to the provider that you're working with, or you can use the AZ login command line, which will bring up a browser, allow you to do your 2FA, and allow you to do that kind of deployment. Or I should say that authentication.
Yep, that's absolutely the case. And that's what I already did, is I just did AZ login connected, because I'm sitting here at the Azure CLI all day long anyway, but if I'm putting this in part of a GitHub action or something like that, then I'm going to again, have that GitHub action has to support the Azure CLI, and then with the appropriate authentication to connect to that. But again, so Pulumi has no access to your Azure subscription. Like, so it's all we're doing is storing state. Now, you can store secrets inside of Pulumi if that's the best vault store for you for things like that. I'm not going to get into that today. But that's where that piece goes. And I kind of took a couple little, I told Jay earlier, like, it's not interesting to watch me type for 20 minutes. So I took a couple examples that I really like. And we're going to sort of do a little tour. We're going to run them, see how they go. And then maybe we'll hack on them a little bit, make some changes, and play with some of the things that are features of Pulumi. Like we talk about this idea of stacks, which you might think about as environments. So every Pulumi, and I'm going to do that in just a second. So I think the first thing I'm going to do here is Can
I ask you for one favor, Matt? Can you Command plus that?
The text is going to be bigger.
Okay.
See,
ooh,
it's just a terminal that's not huge.
Okay, gotcha.
And I can, but I think if I do that, it's going to make my other text bigger. But
yeah, no problem.
It'll be fine. Yeah, it'll. I gotcha. Don't worry. So the first one I'm going to do here is not the Cosmo DB one, but the web server. So we're going to spin up just a Linux web server as an Azure virtual machine and give it a public IP address. Very bog standard infrastructure as code stuff. Just give me a VM, even though everybody's containering all the things and blah, blah, blah. So I already have this. Let me change to the Azure TS web server. Okay. So I already have, in this case, I've already created my Pulumi program and have the code in there, which I'm going to step through. But all that a Pulumi program is it's just a directory with some files in it. And of course, the files that are in there will vary depending upon the programming language that you're writing it in. But what we do have, just sort of a quick little tour, every Pulumi program has a Pulumi YAML, which is just sort of the high level location. You can see that I actually set some configuration values in it, but we're going to talk about stacks in a second where they can get overridden and they can be changed because you might use maybe a different region for dev than you do for prod, if that's how you break things up. And we'll step through the code in just a second. But the first thing that we have to do is I need to create my stack. And so within my Pulumi program, you can have one or more stacks, which a way to think about them might be environments. And the default one we always want is we create one called dev. So I'm just going to say Pulumi stack init dev. And what that's going to do is that went ahead and it created now, and in the Pulumi service, if I were to go to the website, I would see that under this project, I now have a stack called dev. Now, we saw that there was a default configurations in this Pulumi YAML for the config values we're going to create is the region, or sorry, the location, and then the username and password that we're going to use in this particular case. And so the first thing that I'm going to do is I want to set these for my stack. So I'm going to say Pulumi config set, and this is Azure native because, and the location should be West US. Before I do the next one, I want to tell you about one really fun thing. So I noticed because I'm using what's called the Azure native provider. So Pulumi's provider for Azure, for how it works with Azure, is there's an older version of our provider, and then the newer one, which isn't all that new, we've had it for quite some time, is called Azure Native. And the reason it's native is that provider is generated nightly based upon the API surface published by Azure, which means basically within 24 hours of a feature being enabled in the API, it's available in Pulumi. And sometimes you'll see it in Pulumi sooner than Microsoft will tell you about it. So that's a pretty powerful piece of that. And I just thought about that because I saw that. I'm like, that's right, I'm using Azure Native. So we went ahead and we set the, so we're going to go ahead and say Pulumi config set. And then this is going to be at the level of the stack. A username is webmaster. And then we're going to say Pulumi config set password. And then if I do secret, this is going to make sure it gets encrypted. And Jay, why don't you go ahead and I'm going to stop my screen for a second so I can type in a super secret password.
Everybody, it's Gorilla123. That is the password. Sorry, man. It's not Gorilla123, but it'll work for me. But anyway, you've got your configuring your secret.
Okay. Yep, that was just I'm gonna go ahead and go back. And the fun thing is, in reality, all that would matter is because this VM is going to go away in about 15 minutes. But I'm just trying to be smart. So what happened, though, is you notice, maybe you don't notice, you'll notice because I'm telling you, we now have this pulumi.dev.yaml. And so that's the configuration for my dev stack where we've set, and you can see it's encrypted the password. So, cool. Now, let's take a look at the code before we run it of what this is going to do. So we take a look. Now, this is TypeScript. So we bring in these packages. So number one, we have the Pulumi package, and so you get that installed with the npm install. That gives us all of the functions that Pulumi is going to use. But then we bring in the things that we need from Azure Native. We're going to need some compute, right? So we need the compute package. Got to put it on a network. It's not a very useful server if it's not networked. And then there's various resources. So now the first thing is we're going ahead and we're going to use the configuration values that come from Pulumi. So we create a constant called config, which is the overall configuration object. And then of config, which is basically saying, go ahead and take a look at the config. And we're saying set username to make, and by doing config require, this is saying if that's not set for the stack, don't run. Like, and it'll prompt, if we hadn't set that, it would prompt and say, hey, you didn't set this value. I can't continue. I'm not going to even try to run this program. And because we say require secret, this is saying this is an encrypted value. And the thing is, when we have values like this, they also won't show up in the log. You know what I mean? Like in the CLI display and everything like that. So when we treat secrets as secrets, that's a thing that sometimes happens in some tools. You know, you might accidentally in a stack trace or something reveal a secret. So
you want to keep all the things secure.
We do. At least as many of the things as possible. So we're going to create a resource group first because everything lives in a resource group because it's Azure, right? And so because I created resources here, so I can say, okay, so I'm pulling this from here. So my resource group is a new resource group, and I'm going to call it this, right? And then same fun stuff here. We're going to create our virtual network, but because it's a programming language, I've created this constant, so now I don't have to enum this back down. I get it for free. So when I'm saying I'm setting these parameters that are set for the virtual network that I'm going to create, like the address space and the subnets. Well, one of the things when you create a virtual network, you have to tell it what resource group you want it to be in, right? So when we created it up there, we assigned it to a constant. Cool. Now it's a variable. Now it's a thing I can refer to. Not a variable, but rather it's a constant that I can look up programmatically.
And just to remind everybody, this is all in TypeScript, so you're using those the linting and tabs and all that stuff associated with TypeScript. It's all in that extension that you may have installed within VS Code. So whatever language you're using, you're going to be using that same type of linting and syntax checker.
Yep, exactly. And without, as long as the way you like to work in that programming language, that's exactly how you work in Pulumi. Do the same thing as we move along. We're saying, okay, we need to get a public IP. We're going to shove that into our same resource group. And we're going to create our network interface. One of the things you'll see if we take a look at these resources, once they get created, Pulumi does an auto naming to prevent collisions. So like we sat there and we said this resource group is called server RG, but it's really going to be server-RG- some string, right? Some generated GUID type string to prevent a name collision from happening. If you hate this, you can disable it. You can turn it off as you're using it. It's usually not a good idea to do that without a really good reason because, you know, uniqueness of names is a thing. And all that we're doing here is we're just saying, okay, cool.
Creating a basic HTTP server in Python, and you're just presenting a hello world.
We're just dumping hello world into an index.html and saying, show me that. Right?
A little bit of pretty bash there.
Yeah. And then, so we're going to create the virtual machine. So again, but we have all these things that we've used before, right? Remember, we have the resource group that it's going to use. We're setting, we pulled the username and password that it needs to set in the OS came from our credential, from our config values. And when we sit down here and we say, now, so here's one of the tricky things that can happen. So that public IP address is not allocated till the VM is up and running. So we have to wait for that resource to create. And then we look up the IP address again in order to get it. So you can do these done pieces. And this is saying, okay, we're going to stick this constant. When we do an export, this is letting us take a value and that comes out of this and pass it out. And you'll see we're going to use it just from the CLI. It just gets exported out as a CLI. But I can take these values and I can export them from Pulumi program to Pulumi program across different stacks, maybe, because as we get inputs and outputs and where those things happen. So we've got ourselves a pretty good, pretty good code here. And let's take a look. And this is how we would use it. So now we have our code. I'm going to say Pulumi up. And what happens when I run Pulumi up is it's going to sit and it's going to look at the state as it understands it. And it's going to say, what would I need to do? And this is giving it by default, Pulumi up starts with a preview. I could also just say Pulumi preview, but so it's going to sit there. It's going to say, if I run, I'm going to create these 6 things. I'm going to create the resource group. I'm going to create a public IP address, a virtual network, a network interface, and a VM. And if I want, and by the way, I do want, I could go into details and I'll see exactly what it's going to do. Right? This is what the details of all those things are going to be. Cool. So let's go ahead. We're going to say, yes, I would like to perform this update, please. I don't know exactly how long we'll wait. We may come back to this one because spinning up a VM takes more than a hot second.
Well, Matt, while we wait, I want to remind everybody, head over, take the poll, and let us know if you've used Pulumi. But I'd love you to answer a quick question for me. So am I right that when you run these previews or you actually run this, you're getting something on the Pulumi.com website? Do I have to sign up for something?
Yes. Okay. I will show you. Let's while this is going, let's flip over to let's look at what the SaaS looks like.
Absolutely, because I think that's important. Like you want to get that full view of everything, and it looks like Pulumi gives you that using this. And so I see you've got a bunch of different projects and dashboard.
So this is the SaaS that I talked about, which again, you could choose to not use this and store your state somewhere else. But the Pulumi SaaS is free for individuals. Use as much as you want. Teams, if you're collaborating, there's a bit more to that, but we'll talk about that another time. But here's what I see here is I can see these are all of my projects that I have created and worked with in Pulumi. And given what I do and I'm constantly creating them, these are all the projects I've created and not gotten rid of yet. But there's a couple different things. Like, for example, this was a project I did to spin up a Kubernetes cluster on DigitalOcean. Mm-hmm. I wrote it in Python. This is all my stuff for various different code examples I've been writing. But you can see they're in Go and stuff. And this is all the random stuff. And you can see Burke is cool. This came from when I was on the VS Code live stream, if you can believe it or not. Since, had to give Burke a little shout out. Maybe we'll have a J is rad project coming.
Love Burke Holland. Great dude. Yeah.
So cool. Okay. Actually, I just saw the update just went through. So if we were to go back and take a look here, it's under examples. That's why I need to bear with me as I remember the name of this project. It's Azure TS. Where's there? Oh, it's right here in front of me.
There we go.
Cool. Okay. So let's take a look at our project. So number one is got the config, so we can see the config values that we had set. The region can see that it's encrypted. Secrets cannot be compared; they're always determined to be different. And we can see that this is all in the dev stack. And if I were to look at my dev stack, output that IP address, and we can see the configuration, all that stuff. And then if we were to look at activity, this was this Pulumi run that we did, this update that happened. Here's all of my resources. And again, if I look in a graph view, I can see how they connect to each other. It's not the most interesting dependency graph in the world. And then again, this is telling me how I want to get rid of it, which I will in a minute. So I could, because I got that output, I could curl this, or I'm just going to grab it here. But this is the public IP address of that server, which gives us our hello world. There we go. So that's cool. But like what we want to do, and I'm going to switch back over to code.
Sure.
In a second.
And I just want everybody to know that I've put a few links in the chat, and some of them are how Pulumi and GitHub Actions work together, as well as Pulumi and Azure DevOps. So if you're looking for that type of information about your CI/CD process and how it'll work alongside Pulumi, take a look at those links, but don't do it until you finish up here.
Cool. All right, so now we've created that. We've got our stuff out there. That being said, I want to clean up after myself. I don't want these resources still running anymore because I don't know who the Azure equivalent of Corey Quinn is to help me with my Azure bill goes out of control. So I better clean up after myself. So I'm going to do
before you clean up, can I ask one question?
You may.
What happens if you want to make a change?
Oh, perfect. Let's
your
find
infrastructure.
a change. Let's find a change. So we're going to do that in another example, but we can absolutely fix this now. Trying to find something that would be okay. Well, here, let's just do this.
Yeah, simple enough.
Hello,
Update.
Jay. Okay.
Hello.
So if I sit here now, if I say Pulumi up, remember it's going to do a preview first, and it's going to look and it's going to see what is different. What would be different as the resources go. This was actually an interesting one because I'm curious what it's going to do. Okay, yeah, it says the OS profile change. So it says it just has to update one thing, which it doesn't have to go and change. It says there's 5 unchanged resources, one that would be changed. And if I were to look at the details, I could see exactly. Again, it's not very easy to because it's a custom data that's encrypted, So we're like, sure, it looks like a thing that's happening, but that's because of how the Azure works there. I'm not gonna run this though because we don't need to sit and watch it. I think we can trust that we know that's what it's gonna do. But yeah, it's that. But you'll see that's what it would do, and we're gonna actually do one where we will see the change in kind of the next one. But if I say Pulumi destroy, what Pulumi destroy is going to do, again, like everything else, it's going to preview me first, which I could override if I want to do YOLO. And it's going to say, okay, if I want to destroy all these things, and this just means this doesn't delete the project, but it gets rid of these resources. It goes and removes them out of Azure. So we'll let that chug away. Fun fact is I realized earlier today that I never deleted my resources from the stream with Burke. So I did that. If we were to look at it. It was, I think it's like a blob storage. That's about it. With 2 files in it. It was a
couple pennies.
Yep. So cool. I think the one that I want to take a look at next, we can let this kind of go, is this app service one. And this one I think is interesting because is this the one I'm thinking of? Yes. Okay. So if I take a look at what we're doing with this is going to we'll go over here. Word wrap, please. Okay. So this is going to create an Azure app service. It's going to create a SQL database and use application insights. We're going to do that in Pulumi. And so these things can all go together. So now we're going to do a similar thing. Let me do a new terminal because...
So we're building a whole stack of for our entire solution.
This is
from
the theory.
Top to bottom.
Yep. As it happens, you'll see our very complicated website does not actually talk to these things, but they exist.
Gotcha.
But there's I've got some longer examples that just take longer to go through where you could do an Azure function that will then connect to I've got one that I want if we get some time. That's going to be Cosmos DB with an API connection and a Logic app. But
sure, we got about 20 minutes left.
Yeah. So let's see what we do here. But this one, because I want to show kind of a cool thing with this. So again, if we take a look at our code, why does WordWrap just not stick? Okay, so in this case, so we need insights.
Big bugaboo of mine as well.
Yeah, right. But we're going to bring in SQL, we're going to bring in storage, web, resource, all the pieces. Looks familiar. We're going to create a resource group. We need to create a storage account. And this is just a helpful reminder that when you name a storage account, it has to be lowercase without any dashes. Helpful. And then, but you can see again for the storage account, the resource group comes from there. What's the SKU that we're going to use? Mm-hmm. We have to create an app service plan. We're saying, okay, and basically this is how am I going to get billed for this stuff, right? Cool. We're going to create a storage container. Easy enough. And then we create this. And we're basically, because we're doing this Pulumi asset file archive, so this is sitting and saying, shove in everything in this directory, root, which is this very complicated index.html. But it could be our full application if we were making it actually talk to anything. So we need a VM. No, we don't. That's the other code. There we go. And then we're going to get the URL to where that comes from by interrogating all of these things. And we're doing Pulumi apply. So the apply is taking an output from a resource and allowing it to be used by another resource.
Gotcha.
And then we create a new insights component called AI. It's this easy. I mean, this is all there is to it to get App Insights going. We create, and then for SQL Server, we want our username to be Pulumi. And then again, we're going to set a password. Now, in this particular, we're not requiring it to be secret is how we did this one. This to show kind of the difference. So that the point being, you can footgun yourself if you aren't careful. It will still work. It'll still encrypt because we're going to encrypt it, but we're not saying require secret. So if somebody chose to put in a password and not, where that went. Same thing. We're going to create a SQL server. We're going to create the database. We're going to create our web app, and which is using our app service plan that we created. We set all of the fun things. We're saying the web app should talk to there, and then we're going to get the endpoint, which is going to do this Pulumi interpolate. So Pulumi interpolate is letting us sit and take a value from something else and then shove it into the string, right? Because we're constructing a URL out of it. Again,
gotcha.
All the fun programming language stuff. And then this is going to return the get SAS, this function, because again, this is all programming language. So we're able to write a function to get the SAS token, which we used, I lost track, right here. So remember, when we're constructing this, we're basically saying take the args coming from this and then figure out the SAS token. So we're able to do things programmatically. It might be a little overhead to do it that way, but that's sort of proving our point. So first thing we have to do here, again, is do a Pulumi stack init dev, which does the same thing we did before. We now have a stack, and we're going to go ahead and create, we're just going to say, we're going to say that I thought I was going to be faster by copy pasting, and I actually made it worse. There we go. Set our location, and then we want to set our SQL Server password, which again, I'm happy to. This one I don't care because it's going to go away in just a second. And you won't, so secret, and we're going to say it's SQL password, and we're going to say J is pool. Hopefully that's good enough for SQL Server. Okay, cool. And now if we go ahead and run our Pulumi up, we should see all the different kinds. It's gonna have to create a bunch of resources here, which is kind of cool. But I'm going to show how we're going to do the endpoint of this after it comes up, which I think is what the key is. So this one's going to so we can see it's going to create all these things. This is going to take a minute. So I'm going to flip back over to one other thing to kind of talk through, and then we're going to come back to this and look at it, because this is like we're we're playing.
It's going to take a few.
Yep. It's got a few things to do. So we're going to go ahead into. Let's just sort of take a little bit of a look through our friend where we are going to do our Cosmos DB one. So here, again, should look fairly similar.
Establishing a storage account.
Right. And in this particular case, we don't have to set any credentials because none of the things we're building here, we don't need a username and a password for the VM. We don't need a SQL Server password. So really the only config that gets set on this one is the location. But yeah, always goes back to a resource group. We're creating ourselves a storage account.
And just to let everybody know, one of the big reasons why you don't need to worry about credentials here is that Cosmos DB manages its own credentials. So they're all already in the connection string. If you get in the portal, you don't actually need to manage it yourself. And you can rotate those keys. It's a really great way. And you can store your secrets in something like Key Vault to just make sure that you're passing them securely.
And that's what's happening right here, right? We're creating a Cosmos DB account. Because you have to have but the credential part, like Jay said, is not set by us. But this is the account. And then
takes a little responsibility off your hands by pushing it over to Azure.
Gotta love it. Gotta love deferring responsibility. And here's the keys, right? You were just talking about this. So we're creating the keys based upon the account name that we created up there. And then this is giving us the ability to get at them if we need to, as you will see we do, right? We get our client config. This comes from that authorization that we created. And this, again, when you're kind of putting in so we're defining our logic app in here and all of its long schema. And this is a place where you can find, because it's a programming language, we can break up into components and structure this into somewhere else and maybe break it into separate files if it makes it a little bit more readable. For examples, I like to keep them in one place. And then it spits out the HTTP endpoint. If we go back and take a look at, so our web app is up. And so now if I were to sit there and if I were to, what we get is I can get the stack output, right? So if I were to say Pulumi stack output, and remember we said it was called endpoint, that gives me the URL of that. And then if I wanted to, but I can curl and I can do interpolation on this here, right? So I could just say curl Pulumi stack output endpoint. Except it helps if I do the parens.
No big deal. And just so you know, man, we got about 9 minutes left.
Okay, cool. We're gonna make our quick change here. I just wanted. What did I do?
Brew.
No. It's just telling me it wants to do that. This is the output of the Pulumi stack.
Just reminding you, AZCLI.
I'm just going to do this because let's. There we go. Okay.
There we go.
So, and the reason that matters is because now we're going to do something kind of fun with it, right? We're going to make the config change depending upon what stack we're in, right? So if we go back to our friend over here in app service, and what we want to do is we're going to create a new TypeScript file where we're going to put our kind of config stuff. And we're going to say, this should just be, we're going to port config from Pulumi. We're going to create a new config. Actually, I want to think about this. I think does this one pull from a config already? Nope, this should be fine. And I'm going to set a new variable called site directory. Okay. Because we're going to use a different, maybe source directory, depending on which thing we're going to do. So now if we go back over here and we import, if we say import All we want to get in is site.dir. I always do this. I don't know why. Always dirty sites. Ooh, what did I just say?
Uh-oh.
I didn't mean that the way it sounded. Okay, we're going to get that from config. Cool. Okay, it's going to be like, dude, you aren't even using site.dir. What's your problem? And now what we're going to do down here is where we were pulling www root. We're just going to replace that with site.dir. Okay, so the directory that it gets it from, we're just going to say it's from that value. And now if we were to, and let's go ahead and let's just, let's make, let's do an mkdir, a www prod. And let's cp www root to www prod. Okay, and then we're going to say, instead of saying greetings from Azure App Service, we're going to say there. Okay. All right. So now we know what prod is. Cool. So let's go ahead and let's do Pulumi up with the change that we just made. Oops. So if we were to run Pulumi up, it's going to have a problem in just a hot second because missing required configuration value. Site.dir. We never set site.dir. So if we go ahead and say Pulumi config set, what did we call this thing? Azure TS app service and site.dir www. And I also just, okay, so that gives us, if we were to look in here, we now see we have www, but that's not actually, I want it to be www root. Okay, so if we do Pulumi up,
it's running.
Nothing changes because it's pointing to the same thing. It's just, we just put a value in there, but it's the same directory. Now, if we do Pulumi stack init prod, that's going to create a new, and then we're going to Pulumi stack select, and I'm going to say I would like to be, okay, I'm in prod, I'm already there. So now if we go ahead and we do our, we're going to call it, what was this one? Dub prod. So now if I were to say, I'm in this stack, and if I say Pulumi up, what we're going to see, first of all, that's interesting. Missing required configuration variable. What did I do wrong here? We also need we need this site. Yes, we need all these things. Okay, we're gonna cheat this a little bit. Don't mind me. It's all encrypted, it should be fine. There we go. Okay.
Gotcha.
Just because I don't want you to have to watch me type.
I know the feeling.
Nope, because it's the secret. It's the damn secret again. Okay. Let's do, so we are going to have to do with that. We're going to say Pulumi config set SQL. Right, set secret. There it is. Okay. Now we'll get it.
Here we go.
And since it's a new stack, it has to create everything. Because remember, we're in prod now. So it's a totally separate stack. And what we will see when that comes up, which maybe we'll preview at the very end. But let's maybe wrap up for some final thoughts,
yeah.
I think.
Yeah, we're just about done.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Matt, we've learned a lot about how to actually start building with our infrastructure, talking a little bit about state, taking a look at the SaaS, doing all these things that really help build your infrastructure, codifying it. You can go ahead, take the code that you've built here, put it into a repository. I'm guessing that you can build tests around that so that you can ensure that during your CI/CD process that everything is building and presenting the way you expect.
Absolutely. And if you were to go to on the Pulumi website, if you go to our blog, my colleague Sophia has written a series about a week or two ago that was all about writing infrastructure tests with Pulumi. So some great stuff there. I'm a big fan of that's part of treating your infrastructure as code is having great tests or having any tests for that matter. Just have some. Start with that. They don't have to be great.
Absolutely. So Matt, you've got some things like an event coming up.
Yes.
You want to talk to us a little bit about it?
Absolutely. So October 20th is the Cloud Engineering Summit, which is presented by Pulumi, but it's not a conference about Pulumi. We're just sort of the mega ultra platinum sponsor, if you will, or mega sponsor. But what we're bringing together there is different tracks around building, deploying, and managing for cloud engineering. And unfortunately, our CFP is closed. We're putting our track together right now. But as one of the track chairs, I can tell you we have got some banger speakers going on. It's going to be a great event. Registration will be up very soon. But if you go to that website, you can get signed up to be notified as soon as registration is ready. That's the old Cloud Engineering Summit website. It's the pulumi.com/Cloud Engineering Summit. Yeah. But it should be pretty exciting. Absolutely. And I hope to see folks there virtually.
Awesome. So I really appreciate your time with me today, Matt. Is there anything else you'd like to share with everybody or let people know what's coming on? I know you've got some upcoming workshops that people can always take a look at as well.
Yes, we absolutely run a lot of follow along workshops. If you check out that link, you'll see stuff that we have that's upcoming. We actually just did a couple earlier today and then yesterday around Azure. Those will be available on demand soon, so you can give them a try. I encourage you to go to that Getting Started. There's some great tutorials to get you started. And if you go to Pulumi/examples on GitHub, there's tons of great example code for all sorts of different things. There's links on our website to get into our community Slack. We've got a really inviting and welcoming community of Pulumi users who just love to help everybody get going and build awesome stuff together.
Awesome. Well, you know what, Matt? I really appreciate you being part of this today. I would love to hear more another time. If you'd like to come back, we can talk about more things to build with Pulumi. We'll see how the advancements with Pulumi and Azure continue. And so I just want to give you a big thanks. I really appreciated your time.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jay. Anytime.
Awesome. So for me, Jay Gordon, and for Matt, we want to say thanks for watching. And I'm going to be out next week, heading out to Vegas for a little something. But I'll be back the week after that. We'll do some DevSecOps with one of the members of our DevSecOps Azure DevOps team. So until then, thanks a lot, everybody. Let's give them the big wave goodbye. Bye, everybody. See you next time.
Thanks.